two topics, two aspects of kind of the Gazan genocide and updates with Palestine. One is that there's that new Lancet study that was published. Was it Tuesday? I want to say that kind of is putting this this new death toll of the Gazan genocide at it's kind of been stagnant. We've been saying for a few weeks now that those numbers haven't changed. It's been around 40,000 for weeks.
Yeah, that was very sus.
Yeah, and so that like it was steadily rising, a couple thousand each week or whatever the numbers were, and then it just plateaued and stayed at 35,000 for months. And so a lot of us were kind of speculating that that's probably just because anybody who was any infrastructure like hospitals or police or anything that would do the counting has been destroyed. And it seems that this new Lancet study that was released earlier this week kind of proves that, essentially, because their estimates of the death toll have jumped from 35 to 40,000 up to 186,000. They say that the death toll could exceed 186,000, which is kind of on track for the trajectory and the trend of where it was heading before it plateaued.
Yeah.
And so this almost kind of proves our theory in that, just nobody was counting anymore until this kind of outside study was done. And
just
this doesn't
think, 186,000. Listen, that was like about how much happened during the Bosnian genocide, right? During a 3-year stretch, except it's been less than a year.
It's been less than 6 months. It's been
it's been more 6 months.
It's been 8 months. Yeah, it's only been 8 months. Yeah,
but it's been less than a year, and say there was 186. Say it was 150,000. That is the amount that's happened in Bosnia.
Yeah.
But in a quarter of the time. So let's say if Bosnia is a genocide, this has to be a genocide if those numbers are real. Even if numbers were at 35, 40,000, it's still a genocide. But now it's like, dude, you cannot argue. You cannot kill 180,000 people, right? And then not have it considered a genocide. You're a psychopath for that.
Yeah, and you kind of alluded to it, that whether or not this is true, because it's still, we don't really know the validity of this study, but it does take into account that this number is much higher than the official number was, because it's taking into account missing that are dead under rubble, that have been buried under rubble for months now, and it also includes all indirect deaths from food distribution, public infrastructure, health facilities, so all of the people that have died because of the bombings.
Yeah.
Or because they lost access to food and hospital. So either starvation or disease or wounds, not the bombings themselves. So it's also including deaths related to the genocide, or tangential to the genocide, which should absolutely be counted. If you blow up all of a country's hospitals and people die of disease, you're responsible for those deaths. Just because you didn't shoot them doesn't mean that you're not responsible for their deaths. And so that's kind of what this study is taking into account, which is why this number is so much higher. Yeah.
Well, I would have to say that, from what I understand, the Lancet is a very reputable source.
Yeah, and
you can't. It's this is not the New York Times where it's fucking absolutely owned by billionaires or large multi-billionaire corporations, but it's also a medical journal, from what I understand.
Yeah, and so it's want to make clear that this is applying statistics and typical trends with similar conflicts to get that 186 number. So if they have the amount of direct deaths, it's never so it's not unusual. So the quote, I'll let me just quote the actual. I'm quoting from the study, which is reported on in Al Jazeera. So, quote, in recent conflicts, such indirect deaths, so kind of what I talked about earlier, range from 3 to 15 times the number of direct deaths. Continuing to quote, it is not implausible to estimate that up to 186,000 or even more deaths could be attributable to kind of the amount of direct deaths that we have confirmed. If you take an estimate of 4 indirect deaths for every 1 direct death, which is again on the conservative side, that would be a conservative estimate, is 186,000. And they also do point out that estimate of 186,000 is incredibly conservative. So it's probably much higher than that. But given if you take the study at face value, it's kind of the minimum is 186,000. So
if you take that 186,000 number, it's 7 to 8% of the population.
Yeah, such a number would represent
That's
almost 8%, yeah, of Gaza's population. Yeah.
yeah, that's crazy. That's like 8%. You can't make arguments
Yeah, so
for
if
this.
if that is a conservative estimate, then that's probably putting it at 10% of the population. So just imagine 10% of the Gazan population dead. So like that's an insane ratio. One in every 10 Palestinians or Gazans dead.
Imagine if somebody came to Seattle and killed 10% of the populations in Seattle.
Just be insane. 10% of American population, just like I mean that's an insane ratio. Like it doesn't sound a lot statistically, but like as a percentage of
That's
a population,
a lot,
that is a lot.
people.
So I don't know. I just wanted to bring that up. That nobody's really talking about this too much. If you even Google this Lancet study, it's hard to kind of find Western outlets actually reporting on it. It's Al Jazeera. I think MSNBC did one piece on it, and then there's a bunch of like French, like non-American kind of
Yeah.
outlets, and then there's multiple. The Jerusalem the Jerusalem Post, the Jewish Chronicle, all of these kind of Israeli or Israel-friendly news outlets. One, the Jerusalem Post, called Lancet publishing blood libel. And then so they're just like they're freaking out, just like
Anti-Semitism.
yeah, it's just like they're just labeling them anti-Semites for posting their study of or for releasing their study of the.
It's old. It's old. I guess they're just calling everybody anti-Semites.
You're an
Anything
anti-Semite
against
if
Israel,
you don't agree with what we
anti-Semite.
do. Yeah, you don't agree to support our genocide, you're an anti-Semite.
Yeah, 100%.
Anyway, moving on. The something I just wanted to bring attention to was something that was kind of just like in the news recently, is that this idea of what's called the Hannibal Directive. Are you familiar with the Hannibal Directive in Israeli military like procedure?
I'm not. I read up on it a little bit, but not much.
Yeah,
to be
so
honest.
it came as a practice that came out of the late 80s in the wake of some Lebanese, some Israeli soldiers being kidnapped by Lebanese, with fighting with Lebanese. And so now it's kind of this like scorched earth policy that the Israeli military has, wherein they will enact this so-called Hannibal Directive to prevent Israeli soldiers from being killed. They will sacrifice their own soldiers and kill their own people in an effort to reduce kidnappings or reducing their own soldiers being taken prisoners.
Yeah.
So they have a take no prisoners ethos, but only for themselves. So they'll kill themselves. They'll kill their own soldiers in order to prevent them from being taken hostage or prisoners. And this also, like I said, this came out of the wake of some hairy kind of prisoner exchange fiascos that were happening in the late 80s with Lebanon. And so from then on, they kind of have this policy of just not allowing their own people to be taken. And what we realized, or what we've has been reported on, is that in the wake of October 6th, it's been confirmed that the Hannibal Directive was kind of enacted on October 7th. So we knew that a lot of those, that everyone's up in arms about, of all of the Israelis dying on October 7th. We've known as leftists that a lot of those deaths were by Israel. Well, now it's kind of just confirmed that within the last few days, the stories broke that on October 7th, most of its own people were killed by Israel. So the Hamas didn't actually kill those Israelis on October 7th. They were killed by, they killed some. I don't take that out of context, but it was the Hannibal Directive was ordered on October 7th to prevent their own people from being captured. And so those like attack helicopters that were strafing that ground outside of that music venue was done in an effort to kill Israelis to stop them from being taken.